This story is about an event that happened to my mother around 1972 when she was 8 years old. She's told me about it since I was young, and she truly thinks about it and is affected to this day. To set the scene, both of my grandparents ran a restaurant/gas station in our hometown. They have always ran a business of some type since the 50s. This means that a lot of days my mom would have to take a school bus home and stay by herself if my grandma had to stay and help run things. Usually no more than an hour or two. My uncle, her older brother, would usually come home on the bus with her, but he was a little older and sometimes had football practice. So was the case on the day the event I'm getting to. My mother arrived home on this day, let herself in the house and put away her things. She had just recently received a new puppy and knew the first thing she needed to do was take the pup out to the yard to use the restroom. She wrapped the dog in a white towel, this is important, and walked him outside. As she put down the dog, she shook its hair out of the blanket, flailing it about in the wind. It's then she noticed the neighbor's son was staring at her from across the street. This guy was in his late 20s and was known to be very strange and mentally ill, though in the country mental illness seems to not always be recognized. He would do sick shit like killing the neighbor's pigs or skinning stray cats and hanging them from a clothesline in their yard. Real sick shit. My mom said he always creeped her out and everyone else. She said he would stare at her when she would play outside and made her feel generally uncomfortable. She said he appeared out of nowhere in his yard that day, and as she shook out the blanket, he began grinning and waving. Feeling more than a little shocked, she picked up her pup, went inside and locked the door. She began to do some homework, and after about 5 minutes of work, she heard a loud knock at the door. She slowly walked to the window to see who it was. She knew it wasn't my grandparents because of course they had keys. As she opened the blinds, her eyes locked on those of the creep from across the street, like he was already looking in the window. She jumped and said she screamed a little and shut the blinds. She walked to the door and made sure it was locked. She said he just continued to knock with a slow, continuous thud on the door, almost in rhythm. Then she got really terrified as he began speaking to her through the door. "Hi, sweetie. I saw you with your doggy. Let me in to see him." She was in shock. "Come on and let me in, sweetie. Please, I want to see your puppy." In full freakout mode, my mom screamed, "You need to leave now. You need to go back to your house. I don't know you." He kept knocking. I can see the fear in my mom's eyes when she describes that part, and it gives my whole body chills. He said, "Damn it, let me in. I saw you waving your flag of surrender." I shit you not, the guy thought my mom shaking hair from the blanket was a flag of surrender and a sign for him to come over. My mom screamed, "I'm calling my dad and the police if you don't leave now." With this, the knocking stopped. She tried to catch her breath and shake off the fear. She then got up from the door and ran to the basement level of the home. It was an old house, so the kitchen and rec room were down there along with the only phone in the house. She made it to the phone and began to dial 911. All of a sudden, she heard a shatter from the next room. She looked over to see the crazy neighbor attempting to crawl through the kitchen window. He was ripping down the curtain as his upper body got through, and my mother screamed what was happening to the police on the phone. All of a sudden, he was bleeding from the abdomen where the window glass had cut him as his lower half couldn't squeeze through. Then my mother began hearing my grandmother scream, "What the hell are you doing?" Then the guy yelling in pain and squirming out of the window as she hit him from behind with some tool that was laying in her garden on the side of the house where the entrance to the window was. He managed to get out the window and bolt to his house. The police came. Grandma called my grandfather and he arrived as well after shutting down the business as soon as she told him. They arrested him for breaking and entering and something else I believe that was unrelated. Probation violation, I assume. On the day of his court date, he told them the white flag of surrender story. But this was the final nut on his crazy cake as they put him in a mental institution that day. He may have gotten out and went back, because my mother said he died in an institution. Outside the courthouse, the crazy Appalachian redneck family of the creep tried to blame my 8-year-old mother, and the man's father called my mother a harlot. Needless to say, my army-trained grandpa beat the guy's ass on the courthouse steps as the local cops turned a blind eye. That story has always stuck with me. My mom's had to receive therapy for it, so it haunts her a lot as well to this day. We always can't help but wonder, though, what would he have done if my grandma didn't come home at that moment? My mom owns her own business and works extremely hard. This means she spends late nights sitting on the living room floor with her work sprawled out around her. One night back in 2003, she had her typical routine going, sorting through paperwork and making piles. It was late, close to midnight on a Wednesday, so when the phone rang, she was a bit surprised. My dad worked third shift at a factory, so she assumed it was him. When she answered the phone, there was no reply, just lots of heavy breathing. Admittedly creeped out, she hung up and called my dad. He told her he hadn't called and she left it at that. Keep in mind, this was almost 15 years ago, and we lived in a small town with practically no crime. We never locked our doors and were never scared of dangerous people. But the phone calls kept coming. Every night, multiple times a night. And the person on the other end started talking. He started by saying, "Hello, Diane. You're so beautiful. I'd love to meet you." And things quickly escalated into him going into graphic detail of how he wanted to rape and strangle her. Of course, she stopped answering the phone and she informed the police. But nothing was ever done, and the phone would continue to ring. My parents weren't in a situation where my dad could stay home from work, and my mom truly believed the calls were just empty threats, so things continued on. Until one night he got brave. My mom was sitting on the floor in front of our huge mirrored cabinet with all of her work around her when the phone rang. She ignored it as usual. She was concentrating hard on a piece of paper in front of her when a glimmer of light in the mirror caught her eye. She looked up to see a pair of eyeglasses peering at her in the reflection. She spun around to face the front door, which her back had been turned to, and a man was standing there staring at her. She said they both just stared at each other what felt like forever until she finally saw the doorknob turn. She started screaming and the man quickly ran away. In light of the phone calls, my parents had started locking all the doors, which was a totally foreign concept to the household. My older brother, who was around 17 at the time, was aware of the phone calls and came running down the stairs with a baseball bat. But the man was long gone. When the police came, they scoured our property and came across close to 200 cigarette butts right underneath our living room windows, hidden behind bushes. He had been watching her for weeks. The police also happened to find a bike trail coming from the window and going to the sidewalk. They took the cigarette butts and did DNA testing on them and were able to match them to a convicted rapist who lived down the street from us. Robert Ham was arrested while riding his bike. He went to prison for menacing and attempting to commit a crime. He had many priors, so we assumed he would be locked up for quite some time. The reason I'm telling this story is because he was released from prison earlier this year. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. And if you would like to help support the channel, check out that sponsor button by the subscribe button, baby. It's a cool way for you to support this awesome channel and get yourself some cool perks. Look down in the comments. There's people with little skulls by their names because they're cool. Don't you want to be cool? You could be really, really cool. Check out that sponsor button. Do it now. And if you would like to submit a story, make sure you email it to urmaker6260@gmail.com. I appreciate you checking out this video, my precious, and I will catch you in the next one. And just remember, it's always scarier if it's true. Bad bye.